A lot of times with Star Wars, if we look back as what has been discussed on various topics by the creators, it can indicate to us where the future of various stories are headed. What of course I'm talking today is about the story of the Darksaber, a creation by Dave Filoni and the original Star Wars creator George Lucas himself. In an effort to learn as much as I could about the Darksaber and what the creators of the weapon had said, I went back and listened to various interviews, mostly with Dave Filoni talking about the weapon, its origins, and how in fact the Darksaber turned out to be way more significant now than it was ever intended to. The Darksaber is now a staple of the Mandalorian series. It's also quite possibly the most important lightsaber in all of Star Wars in fact, or at least the one with the most in-universe significance. The fact that the wielder of the Darksaber is actually denoted as the leader of an entire culture and creed is astounding. And it's clear that the Darksaber will be playing a pivotal role in the Star Wars universe for the years to come, especially while it's in possession of Din Djarin the Mandalorian, and especially since Bo-Katan Kryze is after the Darksaber after losing it during the event known as the Night of 1,000 Tears, when the Empire invaded and ultimately destroyed Mandalore and most of the Mandalorian people. But that's not what we're here to discuss today, as we did a breakdown on various topics concerning the Darksaber in other videos. Today, I want to talk about some very important details about the Darksaber that Dave Filoni revealed over various years, as at this point in time the Darksaber was created before Disney ever purchased Star Wars, all the way back in the second season of Star Wars The Clone Wars, where its significance was very much a backdrop to the story that they were trying to tell there, and when George Lucas was still heavily involved in the franchise. So, acolytes of a galaxy far, far away, sit back and let's discuss some of the major details that Dave Filoni has revealed about the Darksaber over the years, and talk about just how far the weapon has truly come. Initially, the Darksaber was very much an afterthought when creating Star Wars The Clone Wars. In fact, the Darksaber wasn't originally intended to be a lightsaber at all, as Dave Filoni revealed in an interview around 4 years ago. He explained that when introducing the character of Pre Vizsla, the Mandalorian, that he wanted him to be very intimidating, and that he also felt that there needed to be a sword fight sequence between Pre Vizsla and Obi-Wan Kenobi, since there hadn't been a lightsaber duel in the last few previous episodes of Star Wars The Clone Wars, and he thought that the audience, which was mostly composed of children at the time, would get bored. Because of this, Dave Filoni told the director at the time that he thought Pre Vizsla, as well as other Mandalorians, should receive vibroblades, a popular weapon in the Star Wars universe that we've seen used multiple times, and a weapon that actually holds a lot of importance in the last episode of the Book of Boba Fett, which we'll be discussing in just a moment. Dave Filoni explained that he wanted Pre Vizsla to be a true threat because at the time George Lucas was taking the Mandalorians in a far different way than was intended in Legends continuity. In Legends continuity, the Mandalorians were warriors, and on the level of Jedi in terms of combat capability, or at least close, and were always known as the Jedi killers of the galaxy. They were warriors through and through, gladiatorial, powerful, and not to be trifled with. George Lucas, on the other hand, had a change of heart about the Mandalorians and wanted to take them in a completely new direction, one of pacifism and peace, which is something that is heavily highlighted in the second season of Star Wars The Clone Wars. Dave Filoni, however, managed to come to an agreement with George Lucas that some of the Mandalorians would still follow the warrior culture, and therefore Death Watch and the character of Pre Vizsla, or the warrior-like Mandalorians, continued for the Star Wars mythos, with George Lucas also getting his way, coming to a middle ground between the two stories that each creators ultimately wanted to tell. When they were animating the episode, they showed the footage of Pre Vizsla with the vibroblade fighting with Obi-Wan Kenobi on Mandalore. However, George Lucas didn't like the sequence as he thought that it made Obi-Wan's lightsaber look weak, and the lightsaber in general. As we know, George Lucas has an extreme amount of reverence for the lightsaber as a weapon, claiming that again it's one of the most powerful artifacts and weapons in the entire galaxy, and very much sets a Jedi aside. In the same interview, Dave Filoni went on to say that when a Jedi draws their weapon and they're ready for combat, you know that they mean business, and that is not something that is easily overcome in a galaxy far, far away. Therefore, George Lucas said that a lightsaber would easily cut through a vibroblade. Now, let's talk about how that plays into an important sequence in the Book of Boba Fett, as originally the director and Dave Filoni stated that a vibroblade could actually contend with a lightsaber, something that again George Lucas did not agree with. In the most recent episode of the Book of Boba Fett, Paz Vizsla actually pulls a vibroblade on Din Djarin, who is wielding the Darksaber. lightsaber. However, Din Djarin manages to cut the vibroblade in half using the Darksaber, just as George Lucas, the original creator, said would happen. Anyway, back to the origins of the Darksaber. George Lucas stated that he still thought that there should be a sword fight in this sequence and during this battle, and that instead of using a vibroblade, they should use a lightsaber, but a lightsaber that is different than any other. A lightsaber that looked far more like a sword than a normal rounded lightsaber would. A shorter weapon that was similar to a vibroblade, but not that at all. George Lucas and Dave Filoni came to the conclusion that the Mandalorian weapon would in fact be distinctly a lightsaber, but that it would have to hold some significance to the Mandalorian culture as well. Therefore, believing that an ancient Mandalorian who was inducted into the Jedi Order had created the blade, and that then the blade had been passed down through various generations of the Mandalorians. In the first appearance of the Darksaber, it was actually George Lucas that wrote all of the dialogue of Pre Vizsla explaining its origins and significance. However, this was only supposed to be a line to explain the significance of the Darksaber, as the weapon wasn't that important to the story moving forward, at least not yet. Dave Filoni went on to explain that the Darksaber actually makes a very different noise than that of a lightsaber, as the sound is higher pitched, and it's much more like a normal conventional sword than an actual lightsaber would be. In other interviews, Dave Filoni went on to explain that when the Darksaber is activated, it appears as if all the light in the surrounding area is drawn into the weapon, giving it a unique property again that differentiates it from other more conventional lightsabers. Other than this, unfortunately, Dave Filoni nor George Lucas really talk about the history or significance of the Darksaber openly, obviously because the significance of the weapon is very important moving forward, especially in the story of The Mandalorian. In another interview though, I did actually manage to track down something that Dave Filoni said about the significance and comparison between the Darksaber and a normal lightsaber, saying that a Darksaber is much more different than a normal conventional lightsaber than we all may already presume, stating that this is one of the major reasons why Darth Maul actually opted to not use the Darksaber after the events of Clone Wars Season 5. As in Clone Wars Season 7, we see he moves back to his conventional dual-bladed red lightsaber. Dave Filoni says that the Darksaber is very much not like any lightsaber that Maul has used before. To him, it's almost like using an entirely new weapon. We also know that the Darksaber, thanks to The Mandalorian and Rebels, is far more attuned to a user's emotional state than other lightsabers, and that when wielders of the Darksaber are in a heightened emotional state, the weapon will actually crackle with electricity. It's clear that Dave Filoni has a lot of tricks up his sleeve when concerning the Darksaber, its origins, and most importantly, its future. But I hope this video helped to shine a little bit of light on the origins and history of the Darksaber, as well as some key mentions and comments that Dave Filoni has said about the weapon over the years. But what are your thoughts on this, my friend? And what are your thoughts on the revelations that Dave Filoni had for the Darksaber? And what important role do you think the Darksaber will play in the future of the Star Wars universe? As always, my friends, thank you guys so much for watching the channel. Hit that subscribe button, and may the Force be with you.